Okay, so Mr. Weaver got a haircut, trimmed his beard up a little bit, so now he doesn't have to blur out his face, and we can do this a little bit more normal. And I'm going to try when I go through and do some of the visual editing effects and things of that nature. I'm going to try to add in pictures so you can see what I'm talking about, but we'll see how well that goes. So if I say, look at this picture, and no picture pops up, well, I apologize, but the effort was there. Okay, so last time we talked about the Italian Renaissance, why it was different from the Northern Renaissance. We started to discuss new monarchies and how they started to centralize their power in Spain, England, and France a little bit. So we're past that. So Italian Renaissance, check. Northern Renaissance, check. New monarchies, Ferdinand, Isabella, all those, how they're consolidating their power, not reaching absolute, but still starting to centralize it that leads to that absolutism later. But before we get to absolutism and those new monarchies, we have something else to talk about. Throughout the first two periods of this topic, if I ask you in one word, what is the most major concept that's going on, or what does it have to do with, I hope that in your head you're thinking religion. Religion plays such an important role, especially throughout the end of the 30 Years' War. So anyways, we're going to talk today about the Protestant Reformation. So the Protestant Reformation, name that should come to mind right away is Martin Luther, but Martin Luther is not going to be the first individual in Europe to step up and criticize the Catholic Church and a lot of their practices that people disagree with. Two early reformers back in the early 14th century are going to be John Wycliffe and John Huss. John Huss, who was going to be burned at the stake for his beliefs, for following along with what John Wycliffe earlier on was discussing. But you got to remember, after the bubonic plague, the Black Death that killed 1 out of every three Europeans, demolished whole towns, things like that, it's going to have a major effect on how people view religion. One, how would God let something like this happen? People thought it was the end of times. We hear about the end of times all about today, but people back then thought that was the end of times. Everyone around them, whole cities and everything were being destroyed. People started to question the Catholic Church. So not only is the Catholic Church going to lose some of its power and prestige during the bubonic plague, but in addition to that, their tax base, their supporters are going to decrease exponentially, because most of them are going to die, or not most of them, but a lot of them are going to die during the bubonic plague and the Black Death. But John Wycliffe and John Huss, after the bubonic plague, they both started speaking out against some of the church's policies that aren't listed anywhere in the Bible, that they don't really understand, that they see as greedy, things along this line. Simony is one of them, which is the selling of church offices to the highest bidder, very religious. One person in the clergy, remember, someone from the clergy is someone that holds a Catholic Church position. People in the clergy selling their, or holding a pluralism is what it's called, basically holding more than one position in the church. It allows them to collect salaries from both jobs, have the power and all the things that come along with both jobs, but it's kind of hard for one person to do multiple jobs, especially if those jobs are spread in different places throughout the country, or even throughout Europe. Most of them were super, super wealthy. The church had a ton of money, but instead of spending that money on people that needed it, they were spending a lot of money on art, like we talked about during the Renaissance, architecture. The Pope lived this luxurious lifestyle. So the church is absolutely rich. All the members of all the high-up ranking officials live this luxurious life, while its followers, the people that are supporting them with the money, are living a life of poverty. It got to be so bad that some of the priests in their education weren't even taking it seriously, that some couldn't even read and write Latin that they were preaching about. So you can see there was a lot of problems that date way back all the way to the 14th century that John Wycliffe, and then further on John Huss, who was going to be burned at the stake, are going to start criticizing. So even though that is a little bit back, it kind of takes a back seat for a while, until someone by the name of Martin Luther, which we should all be really familiar with, is going to decide to post his 95 Theses on the door of a Catholic church, and is going to start the permanent split of Christianity in Europe and eventually throughout the world. So basically, there's a monk named Martin Luther. He promised to dedicate himself to the church after surviving a lightning storm at a younger age, but none of that's super important. Basically, he is someone that struggles with what is going to happen to him when he dies. He tries to be a good Christian, but the Catholic Church taught two things. That in order to be saved and go to heaven, that you need to do two things. You need to have faith in God, and you also need to do good works. But as Martin Luther is, and we all are, he was a sinner. He was concerned about the negative things that he did and whether that would get him into heaven or not. So in reading through the Bible in different biblical letters and things of that nature, he comes across it and it speaks out to him, and it really has an impact on him, that all one needs to get into heaven is faith alone, which is going to be one of Martin Luther's major Lutheranism ideas. So no longer the good works, but having faith in God alone is going to be enough to get into heaven. But that strictly goes against what the church was teaching as a whole. In addition to this, so he's going to start speaking out of that, but what is really going to get to him is the sale of indulgences. The sale of indulgences, or basically paying money to forgive your sins, or paying money for someone else's sins that's already dead so their soul can go to heaven, is basically a man by the name of Johann Tetzel, sent by Pope Leo X, what basically gave Johann Tetzel permission to go around and collect money from people and give them a piece of paper saying your sins are forgiven. He would even take in advance money for future sins that one hadn't committed yet. So basically you were paying money to have your sins forgiven, and nowhere, anywhere in the Bible does it say anything about that. So that is going to be one of Martin Luther's biggest complaints about the church. So he decides on October 31st, 1517, he's going to take his 95 Theses and nail them up to the church door. And he's going to, basically, his 95 Theses are his 95 problems or whatever with the Catholic Church and their practices. You don't need to go into, like, specifically, it's not like you need to memorize all 95 of them, but it's important to know the main ideas of what he was against and what his problem was. But the thing was, at the time, you didn't question the Catholic Church. You didn't question the Pope. They were the ultimate authority. So if you're questioning them, you're going to have a problem. So we're going to find out what is going to happen to Luther after posting these 95 Theses. So after posting the 95 Theses on the wall of the church door, Luther isn't done. He's going to have many pieces of literature that are going to speak out against the Catholic Church and a lot of their practices. One thing he speaks out against are their sacraments. The only two sacraments that Martin Luther believed, because they're actually listed in the Bible, which he saw as the sole authority, would be baptism and communion. So he thought there was only two compared to the seven that the Catholic Church taught. In addition to that, the way communion was done, or transubstantiation, it was another major disagreement between Luther and the Catholic Church. The Church believed that after the after the priest blessed it, that it really became the blood and body of Jesus Christ. But Luther's going to say, no, that's not what's happening. Basically, what's happening is he's present there, but it's not like you're actually eating the body and blood. Like, the thing doesn't change, even though God is present there. So that was two more of their major differences that he's going to talk about. Again, we said the Catholic Church taught that you needed to be saved by faith and good works. Luther is going to speak out against that and say, no, faith alone is enough to do that. And that's going to be, again, another one of Luther's main arguments. So Luther is going to be excommunicated. Basically, he's going to get under the Pope's skin. He's going to get under Charles V's skin, because he is going to constantly keep attacking the church and their practices. And if it's one thing the church doesn't like to be, it's questioned. They're supposed to be the ultimate authority. So he is going to be summoned to something called the Diet of Worms, which is basically when Charles V, who is leader of he's the Holy Roman Emperor, and Luther is technically from the Holy Roman Empire. Luther's going to come, and Charles V is going to ask him to recant on his beliefs. Luther's going to refuse, and basically he's going to have to flee to Saxony, and he's going to live there, kind of excommunicated from the church, but lucky for Luther, he's not going to be burned at the stake like John Huss was earlier. So again, to summarize Luther's main beliefs, salvation by faith alone, just believing in God is enough. The Bible is the valid authority, meaning the Pope cannot overrule something that's in the Bible. Baptism and communion should be the only sacraments, rather than the seven that the Catholic Church had. Something called the priesthood of all believers, which is basically, in order to have a relationship with God, the Catholic Church taught that you needed to go to church and talk to a priest and that type of thing. Under Luther's idea of priesthood of all believers, it's basically saying that you don't need like a third party or the Catholic Church to go through to have a relationship with God. You can do it by yourself, and it doesn't need to be in church, that type of thing. Another one of his ideas that went against Catholic Church teachings is he believed that all jobs were equal. The Catholic Church put more prestige on jobs that were in the clergy having to do with the church, but he argued that a farmer's work, a mason's work, anyone else's work was just as important because they were meant to serve their God in their own way. Not everyone could be a member of the clergy, but that doesn't mean that the two jobs are unequal or anything like that. So you can see why peasants are really going to support Martin Luther, because a lot of their ideas sound good to them. When it comes to women, he said they should be the morals and basically be like the poster child for obedience and charity. But one thing that wasn't common for the time in a lot of the Holy Roman Empire and throughout Europe is for women to have an education. Because Martin Luther wants people to read the Bible for themselves, that would require all women to go and get an education because they could read it, interpret it for themselves, and therefore not have to go through that third party. So those are the major ideas of Lutheranism by Martin Luther, and it's going to spread to a lot of the northern European countries throughout Germany, the Holy Roman Empire, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland are all going to be countries where Martin Luther's ideas become very, very popular. So as I said earlier, Martin Luther's ideas are really going to catch on with the peasant population. The reason being is they saw what he was saying is not only an attack on the Catholic Church, but as an attack on the status quo of society. As the vernacular was now starting to be more common, Bibles were printed in English and German and that type of things, and people began reading it for themselves instead of relying on their priests and churches to provide them with that information. They started realizing how much Christianity is about helping the poor, yet there you have the poor peasants that are giving their money to the church and aren't being supported by the nobility or the church or the people. So this is going to, in 1524, 1525, it's going to result in the peasant revolts. This is an important topic because they see Martin Luther as their leader. They see someone that is attacking the nobility, attacking the way things have always been, attacking tradition, and going and supporting them. So they start revolting, going after the nobles, taking their land. They go from different estate, all throughout the Holy Roman Empire, the peasants start revolting. But Luther doesn't react the way the peasants thought that he would. Basically, instead of supporting his revolt, he's going to tell the nobles to crush these revolts because he believes that people on earth should be subordinate to their superiors, and in this case, nobility. So while Martin Luther was attacking the Catholic Church and all of these other practices, he was revolutionary in that way, but at the same time believed in the power of the government to control the people, and therefore if the government got out of line, if the people got out of line, it was the government's job to go and shut that down. Over 100,000 peasants are going to be put down by various princes and nobility that are going to come together to put down the peasant revolts. So while Martin Luther is going to decrease the power of the Catholic Church, he is going to increase the power of the nobility because he is going to put his word behind them that they should, deal with rebellions in that type of way. And remember, many of the reasons that after Martin Luther's ideas start to spread, a lot of the reason these nobility and these princes decide to become Lutherans isn't because, oh my God, they had some great epiphany about religion and what the Catholic Church was doing is wrong. They basically used it as a way to gain more power themselves. They were always subordinate to the Catholic Church, had to give so many of their tax accumulations and stuff to the Catholic Church, but if you're not Catholic, now whoever's in charge of that government gets to keep all the money. So it's super important to know about the peasant revolts. The peasants revolted because of Martin Luther and asked for his support, and Martin Luther is not going to support them. He's going to tell the nobility to crush them because he doesn't believe, he believes on earth that you should follow your superiors in that type of way. So Martin Luther wasn't the only person that had ideas on priesthood of all believers, supremacy of the Bible, that had problems with the Catholic Church. Two other individuals, one by the name of John Calvin, who is going to be the founder of Calvinism, and Ulrich Zwingli, are going to break off and still be Protestant, but instead of being Lutherans, they are going to practice Calvinism, which is known as the Puritans follow Calvinism in England, and in France they're called Huguenots. So just knowing that all of those are the same religion that they're following, based on John Calvin and Ulrich Zwingli. So basically, they're going to agree with a lot of Martin Luther and his ideas and what he says. They agree that you don't need a relationship with the Catholic Church or the Pope in order to go to heaven. They believe that the Bible should be the ultimate authority. So they agree on a lot of things. But one major difference that they disagree on is something called predestination. Calvinist, one of the Calvinist major beliefs is that there's this group of people called the elect, that when they are born into this earth, God already knows that they're going to be saved, and it's a very small number of people. Everyone else is due to live a life of sin, and because of that, but God already knows who's going to happen. Basically, so predestination is knowing God already knows at birth what is going to happen in your life to have you end up in either heaven and hell. And again, the name for the people that are going to be saved are called the elect. John Calvin is going to, when you see or come up with a city that has to do with John Calvin, hopefully we can come up with the city of Geneva, Switzerland. Basically, they're going to invite John Calvin to set up this Calvinist society in the city of Geneva. Super strict laws. You couldn't play cards. There was no theater. There was no dancing. You were forced to go to church every Sunday. Very, very strict. So strict that when the Spanish Inquisition was going on, and a Jewish refugee fleeing Spain appeared in Geneva, they burned him at the stake for being a heretic or not a follower of the true Catholic or the true Christian religion. So even though they broke away from the church, you can see that Calvinists are going to be very strict in their religious beliefs. So it is going to be a very tight community in that type of way. And remember that Calvinists in England are called Puritans, Calvinists in France are called Huguenots. All three names that just mean the same thing based on where they're from. So in 1546, so we're getting a little bit past Martin Luther when he posted the theses, but his ideas have been spreading due to the printing press. So I know we've already talked about that in the last one, but keep in mind how important the printing press is. Printing press is able to spread his ideas throughout, and a lot of the princes throughout the Holy Roman Empire, along with the countries that I mentioned earlier, began converting to Lutheranism. So basically, they're going to convert to Protestant, and therefore the Catholic Church isn't getting any more of their money. The Catholic Church doesn't have control over those anymore. And if you were a person or a peasant living under one prince, whatever religion they chose would be the religion that you would have to choose too. It's not like every single person in the Holy Roman Empire would get to pick for themselves. You would have to follow whoever was in charge of you or who your leader was. So that's going to lead to something called the Wars of Reformation. Wars of Reformation that break out in 1546 and last until about 1555. It's going to be when Charles V, Holy Roman Empire, is going to march in, get an army together, Catholic army, and fight against all of the Protestant nobles known as the Schalmatic League, which I'm definitely mispronouncing. So basically you have all of the German princes that are uniting together, fighting against Charles V so they can keep their religious freedom. And remember, even though it's religious freedom, a lot of the reasons for nobles declaring themselves separate from the Catholic Church had more to do so they could increase their own power than some religious epiphany that they had, that Luther had the right ideas and the corruption of the Catholic Church. The Wars of Reformation are going to, one more thing, it's important to know that France is going to help out, France is a Catholic country, that means they're going to help out Charles V, right? Wrong. It's important to know that throughout all of history, pretty much, France is going to be terrified of a united Germany. They wanted Germany split up between those princes and everything else so they wouldn't be unified. Therefore, France wouldn't have a superpower enemy on their doorstep. So even though France is Catholic, they are going to support the Protestant princes. There's going to be a lot of battles back and forth between the Protestant princes, who are supported by France, and Charles V. But basically, it's going to be a stalemate. Nothing is going to get done. You're going to have heavy losses on both sides. It is going to end in one of the most important peace treaties that we learn about in this course in 1555, which is, hopefully it's in your mind already, the Peace of Augsburg. So the Peace of Augsburg in 1555 ends the fighting of the Wars of Reformation, and its major outcome or major decision that you need to know is that it allows people living in the Holy Roman Empire, the princes, to choose between following Martin Luther's ideas or remaining Catholic, and that either one of them is okay. It still does not make Anabaptists okay. Remember, Anabaptists were the people that believed that you needed to be baptized as an adult, the way they interpreted the Bible, and also that Anabaptists believe in complete secularization or complete separation of church and state. probably because they were prosecuted everywhere they went, but that's a different story. But also Calvinists were not included in this. So if you're ever writing in an essay like, oh, the Peace of Augsburg put religious freedom into the Holy Roman Empire, that's not technically true. It gave princes the power to choose between being Lutheran and being Catholic, but again, that is not complete religious toleration, so make sure you're careful on how you word that. Okay, this next part of the segment, we're going to be talking about the Protestant Reformation in England. It is sponsored by Monster Energy. It gives you wings. Actually, you know what? I think that's wrong. But either way, Monster, Red Bull, please don't copyright my video. I promise I'm just a poor AP Euro teacher trying to get my students to pass. Okay, Protestant Reformation in England. The Protestant Reformation in England is going to happen under Henry VIII. Henry VIII is going to take over in 1509. A few years before the Protestant Reformation begins, with Martin Luther posting his 95 Theses, and he's going to die in 1547, which is just after the start of the Wars of Reformation, just to give you a time period of in England what he's living through. So what's going to happen is when Martin Luther posts his 95 Theses, Henry VIII is going to call him a heretic. He's going to speak out against him. The Pope is going to give him the nickname Defender of the Faith. So King Henry VIII, a devout Catholic, Defender of the Faith, hates Martin Luther, all about the Catholic Church. Well, that's going to change. His first marriage to Catherine of Aragon doesn't go the way he plans it to be. The reason being is, what does every king want? You guessed it, you playing it, everyone playing at home. They want a male heir, and she is unable to provide him with one, so he asks the Pope to annul his marriage. The Pope says no. Part of the reason the Pope says no is because of his relationship with Charles V and her relationship with King Henry VIII. But anyways, the important thing to know is that he says no. The reason that's a problem, if the Pope won't grant him an annulment to his marriage, he is unable to legally marry somebody else and have a male heir, which is the most important thing for a king at this point in time, as he is still trying to solidify the Tudors in England here, as he's only the second one after King Henry VII before him. So, that is going to lead to the Act of Supremacy. Basically, the Act of Supremacy is going to make himself head of the Anglican Church, or the Church of England. It is going to sever all ties to the Pope and Catholic Church. And basically, so Henry asks for a divorce, he doesn't get it. An annulment, doesn't get it. So he decides to say, okay, see you later, Pope, see you later, Catholic Church. I'm going to make my own religion that is exactly like the Catholic Church, same everything. The only difference is, instead of the Pope being in charge of it, the monarch of England is in charge of it. Therefore, it makes him completely powerful. He has power over politics, he has power over religion. It does a lot to make... It's another step towards that absolutism that we're going to be talking about a couple years headed in advance here. So basically, after the Act of Supremacy, King Henry VIII is going to take all of the church lands. He's going to sell them to the nobility. He's going to sell them to the gentry, the merchant class started to get more wealthy off of trade and that type of thing. And those people are going to become extremely loyal to him because they're going to make a lot of money off this land they just bought from them. So obviously, the Catholic Church and Pope are upset about that, but doesn't matter to King Henry. He ends up divorcing his wife and marrying 5 more along the way. So he's going to have 3 kids that survive throughout, childbirth. One being Elizabeth I, another being Mary. They named Bloody Mary, but we'll get there. And Edward. So he finally gets his male heir, but it's not going to go very well for him after King Henry VIII dies. So it's important to know, Act of Supremacy, Anglican Church, he becomes in charge of the Church of England. They break up, sell all the lands, that type of thing. After he dies, Edward VI takes over in 1547, and he is young, though. He's got a lot of health problems. He is only going to make it till about 1553 before he passes away and dies. So he rules as a young man. He's under him, the country of England is going to be more Protestant, not because he was some devout Protestant, but because his advisors that pretty much made all of his decisions were Protestant. When he dies, Mary I takes over, and she is a devout Catholic. So England switches from Catholicism to the Anglican Church, back to Protestant, and then again back to Catholic, if you're sticking with me. So under Edward, Protestant. Under Mary, it goes back to Catholic here. She's going to get the nickname Bloody Mary because she's going to violently suppress and kill anyone that refuses to follow the Catholic religion. So she's going to prosecute Protestants that are living there. She's only going to be in charge for about 5 years until in 1558 Elizabeth I takes over, and she is going to be the one that brings stability back to England. She is going to turn England back to Protestant, but at the same time, she's going to be very religious tolerant. Instead of caring more about what religion people were, she just wanted to see her country stop the bloodshed, stop the killing of religion both ways, and wanted to see her country prosper. So she wanted to put her country in front of religious beliefs and that type of thing. And she is actually going to be one of the most stable, is considered to be a really good ruler of England. So it goes Edward VI, who was Protestant, Mary I, who was Catholic, Elizabeth I, who takes over and turns England Protestant again. So the major effects of the English Reformation on the church: loss of power by the Catholic Church, a further split of Christianity, and the entire Protestant Reformation as a whole is going to lead to more nationalism, as now the state or country or the government becomes superior to the church for pretty much the first time in European history at this point. So obviously with the Protestant Reformation, it's going to be the split of Christianity in Europe between Protestants and Catholicism. And there's even, like we said, we talked about the Anabaptists, the Calvinists, the Lutherans. So even the Protestants are going to be split among themselves. So it's important to know that the Catholic Church isn't just going to take this kind of laying down. The Reformation is going to start something called the Counter-Reformation and the wars of religion that are going to take place because of that. Pope Paul III, from 1534, who's going to be Pope from 1534 to 1549, is going to have some ideas on how the Catholic Church can gain back some of its followers that it's lost over the years to different Protestant religions that exist. One of those things is the Ursuline Order of the Nuns. Another is the creation of the Jesuits by Ignatius Loyola. The Jesuits, or Society of Jesus, are like basically Ignatius Loyola had the spiritual army that was doing God's work. They were all about discipline and obedience. He's going to write the book Spiritual Exercises, which is all about prayer and worship and how to do that properly type thing. So know that the Jesuits are also going to do missionary work throughout Asia, in the New World, like all the places where these European countries are exploring. They're also going to have education for like middle and upper class boys, but their main goal is going to be combating Protestantism and getting everyone to turn back to Catholicism. Under Pope Paul III, another thing, the Index of Prohibited Books. A lot of things by Erasmus are going to be on there. A lot of works by Martin Luther are going to be on there. Basically anything that paints the Catholic Church in a negative light or says that they're wrong. So there's going to be a meeting that takes place over the course of several years called the Council of Trent. It is basically high Catholic Church ranking officials that come together to discuss the problems that the Protestant Reformation has done and kind of take like an inward look on themselves. Are we doing the correct thing here, and so forth? And you get a bunch of people together that have the same idea. They're Catholic. They kind of all agree with each other. They go, hey, everything we're doing is right for the most part. We agree with all of our sacraments. We agree the Pope is in charge. We agree with all of these things. We are going to condemn Protestantism. The reason that's important, because the Council of Trent is guaranteeing that they're not going to make a lot of changes to their belief system, which is going to forever guarantee that split in Christianity in Europe between Protestants and Catholicism. They are going to make some change to the Council of Trent. They do agree with some of Martin Luther's ideas, though they don't give him credit specifically. They get rid of priests being able to hold more than one position, and they have to reside in the parishes that they control. They're mandated before they become to get an education, making sure they know how to read and write and that what they're telling the people is accurate out of the Bible, that sort of thing. But probably the two most important things is they now ban simony, or the selling of church positions, and the sale of indulgences. So those are going to take a back seat. It's not that it never happens again, but basically the Catholic Church condemns those things and says those things should not be done anymore, which is like a step in the right direction, but since they really don't make any concessions, they refuse to recognize Protestantism, it is going to guarantee that split's going to happen. And again, that's the Council of Trent. The major art movement of the Counter-Reformation is Baroque art. Baroque art, and I'm hopefully going to be showing some pictures popping up here throughout the video, are used by the church, basically like these dramatic scenes with light, and it's meant to overwhelm you emotionally, like walking into a church and seeing like the paintings around you of the different books or from Genesis, that type of things, that are just supposed to overwhelm you with emotion and connect you like spiritually back to God, but through the Catholic Church, not in your own, because the Catholic Church, of course, believes that in order to have a relationship with God, you must do it through them. And again, hopefully some pictures are going to be popping up here showing you some examples of that. So later on, King Philip II of Spain, which is Charles V's son, who is ruling Spain at this point, when he takes over after Charles V, he kind of wants to make it his mission to continue on his father's work. So King Philip of Spain is going to want to advance Spain, continue to make Spain more powerful, reunite Europe under Catholicism, and okay, bless his heart for wanting to try, but at this point, there's already been too much bloodshed and too much separation for that to happen. And he also wanted to kick the Turks out of the area around the Mediterranean Sea, but the major thing King Philip II of Spain wanted to do is reunite Europe under Catholicism, and that is going to be a direct violation of the Peace of Augsburg. So Philip II, when he takes over, is going to violate the Peace of Augsburg because he's going to march into the Holy Roman Empire during these wars of Reformation or religious wars at this point, and try to convert everyone back to Catholicism and end that Protestant split that took place. So as Philip II is trying to, prove Spain's power, trying to convert Europe back to Catholicism, he's going to make a couple major mistakes. One of those mistakes is he's going to try and send the Spanish Inquisition into the Spanish Netherlands. The only problem with that is the Inquisition, as we know, is very cruel, very unforgiving. A lot of innocent people are going to be punished, and the Dutch that are living there don't really appreciate Spanish, even though they're under their control, don't appreciate Spanish soldiers coming in there. There's going to be a lot of rebellion and riots against people coming in. So instead of backing off, Philip II decides to double down and send even more troops into the Spanish Netherlands. Because it costs money to keep troops there, he then started to tax the people in the Spanish Netherlands more, and the Inquisition there, anyone that was speaking out against Spain, Catholicism, or anything else, he's going to have thousands of people killed. So basically, the people in the Spanish Netherlands were upset with the Spanish troops that were there, upset the Inquisition was coming there, those type of things. And Philip II's response was, instead of, pulling it back or creating a dialogue, was to send more troops, tax them for the troops having to be there, and kill thousands of people that are up there. A lot of people in the Spanish Netherlands at this point in time, especially in the northern part, are going to convert to Protestantism, basically to kind of slight Philip II because he's such a devout Catholic. So a lot of them are going to identify Catholicism with his corrupt rule, or what they see as his corrupt rule, and convert to Protestantism. So it's basically going to break out in a war between the Spanish Netherlands that want to break away from Spain, and Spain trying to hold on there, keep them Catholic, that type of thing. So in 1581, Holland led by Holland and the northern Dutch countries are going to say, hey, we declare independence from you. We are no longer part of the Spanish Empire. There's going to be a war that goes on with the Spain trying to keep them and them trying to break away, similar to the American Revolution that we know about and we've learned since grade school here. In 1609, Holland, in that northern part of the former Spanish Netherlands, is now going to be known as, those people are going to break away. So the Dutch are going to be independent in the northern part of, around Holland and those northern provinces, while the Spanish Netherlands to the south are still going to remain there. So half of the Spanish Netherlands are going to break away and become the Dutch, and the southern part are going to stay under the control of Spain. They're officially recognized as their own sovereign nation in 1609. While these battles were going on, it's important to know the role of England. England, under Queen Elizabeth, is going to support the Netherlands revolting against Spain, and obviously that's going to upset Philip II. So Philip II is going to create this huge armada of 160 huge Spanish ships that he's going to send to go invade England because they're helping the Netherlands revolt against them. Unfortunately, bad weather, the small, tiny, quick ships of England are going to be raiding them the entire way. That Spanish Armada is never going to make it to England. They're going to have to return to Spain, and over half of their ships are going to be like lost to sea, lost to the storms, lost to the battles with the smaller, faster English ships. So that was a complete disaster. So Philip II was unable to convert everybody back to Catholicism. He had the northern part of the Spanish Netherlands break away from him, and he lost most of their navy by trying to invade England, and the ships aren't even going to get there. So this is going to start kind of, even though they're still a military power at this point in time, this is what's going to start to mark the downward of Spanish power. It's going to start to mark the increase of England's power because as Spain decreases in power, England is going to kind of fill that void that exists. And this also starts the Dutch Golden Age, who are going to make a lot of their money off shipping and commercial shipping, transporting things from one to another. So those are all the kind of things that are going on around the late 1500s, early 1600s. So we've talked about religious wars, and we've talked about Spain, we've talked about the Holy Roman Empire, we've talked about what it went through in England. One major place we're leaving out is, hopefully, again, you guessed it, France. So in France, in England they were called Puritans, Calvinists were, and in France Calvinists are called Huguenots. Huguenots only made up like 1/10 of the population in France around 1560, but many of them were wealthy nobles. Again, realizing that nobles, if they were Protestant, didn't have to give taxes, didn't have to have allegiance to the Catholic Church. It made them more powerful themselves. Catholics were worried about like this increase in Protestant power, so Catherine Medici is going to organize the St. Bartholomew Days Massacre in 1572, which is going to be at her daughter's wedding. She is marrying Henry of Navarre, who is a Protestant, so all of like the wealthy, most well-known Protestants are showing up to this wedding. She is going to have them attacked, murdered, and killed. And in total, over 20,000 Protestants throughout not only where the wedding was going on, but throughout France are going to be killed. And it's going to break out into this 15-year war, civil bloody war between the Protestants and Catholics that live there. Henry Navarre is eventually going to become Henry IV in 1589 when he becomes powerful, when he becomes King of France. But he realizes because most of the population in Paris and throughout most of France itself are still Catholic, that if he wants to have any type of chance at being a successful ruler, there's no way he can do it as a Protestant. So he's going to convert to Catholicism. He's going to say Paris is worthy of a mass, like a Catholic mass, trying to show the Catholic people that like he's a Catholic now and that type of thing. But he's not going to forget about his Protestant upbringings or the people, the civil war that's going on. A really important document in 1598, he is going to put forth the Edict of Nantes, and basically that is going to say France is a Catholic country, but it's going to guarantee religious freedom to the Huguenots that are living there, and creates religious freedom for those type of people, so they're no longer being prosecuted against in France. So that's a very short summary of the religious wars and everything else that went on in France with Henry of Navarre and the Edict of Nantes and the St. Bartholomew's Day Massacre are the most important things to know there. But again, as I've said in the last video, these videos are not all-inclusive. This is me going back and creating notes of things I want to talk about, and saying them on video to kind of re-jog your memory, as this stuff was so long ago. Make sure you're reviewing your chapter questions. So many Quizlets, so many other videos on here that you can use of teachers that have been doing it for 20 years instead of just 1 year. So I'm preparing you the best I can. A lot of good information here, but again, make sure you're studying as many different things as possible, because each new thing you study is going to give you a different perspective. It's going to give you new information and that type of thing. One thing that I want you to think of as kind of an essay question throughout this video, and you can even rewind it and go back if you want. This might have been when I had the Bills helmet on, I can't remember. But can you think of like if you got an essay question that asked you to analyze the similarities or compare the similarities of King Henry VIII and Martin Luther, what are some of the things that you would talk about? Are they more similar? Are they more different? What would be the specific evidence that you use? What would be your counterpoint? That type of thing. So if you want to, in the comments below, try to give me what type of response that you would get. Are King Henry and Martin Luther more similar, more different? What is your specific evidence? Why? Again, I hope this was helpful. Comment any questions below. Keep studying, y'all.